Hey there, it's that Sunday School girl. Thank you so much for checking out this week's Sunday School highlight video. Yeah, that's my silly happy Friday and I'm glad about it dance. I had a good week, a very busy one. My girls are still here, so I am working hard and woo! Playing hard with the girls too, creating great memories and just having a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of work. God bless you parents again. Second week shouting out to the parents. God bless you for this. But we're having a good time. And you know what? This evening when Auntie finishes work, there is some new Disney movie, I think, or something that's come out. So we're going to check out the movie. And thank you, Groupon. Tomorrow we're going to go to a paint class. And someone is coming to visit my church on Sunday. So they sent me a text last night and they said, what time do you leave for service on Sunday? And I'm like, 8:30. Why? Because we will be in Sunday school, and I hope that you and your family have something really fun planned too. And yes, I hope that you have Sunday school on the agenda as well. You know, this video comes to you each week for 3 reasons. Number 1, to encourage you to make Sunday school a part of your regular weekend routine. Secondly, when you arrive, if you use the standard curriculum, that you at least have a familiarity with your lesson and you understand the lesson and can talk about it. I promise you, I hear so many reasons that people don't like to go to Sunday school, and you know, one of the common ones is it starts with the words, well, my teacher. That's not an answer in 2015 because we are half the battle in making our classes great. And if we as students can come in prepared, I promise you it makes the teacher's job very different and a lot easier because it allows them to become facilitators of discussion that really raise our classes and raise the level of discussion that we have in our classes, and not so much expecting them to slice our heads open and pour all that knowledge in. So know what it's about, and then when we leave, most importantly, understand how to activate God's word in our everyday lives when we go back out into the places that we live, work, and serve. So we are in our 3rd week of a new quarter, and the quarter is entitled God's Prophets Demand Justice. And you know, there's never an accident, or you know, this is not by happenstance that we have these kinds of lessons coming to us. If you look at our own world, if you look particularly at our country, so much is happening in our own country this week. You know, we are praying certainly for the city of Charleston, the St. Emmanuel AME Church, and the tragedy that happened there this week. So much is going on in terms of injustice and hate and bad feelings in our country that are spurring into so many different behaviors. I happen to live in Dallas, and we're just 2.5 or 3 weeks off of the infamous pool incident in McKinney, Texas, where police officers mishandled a situation that involved young people, and watching those videos was incredibly hard. And these lessons really challenge us as people of God not to become comfortable in our own settings, but really looking at the environments around us and using our places, our spaces, our voices to address injustice, and really challenging us to look at ways that we can become active in our own areas and our own communities. These lessons are really pulling us to that. So we see these prophets, these people who are not necessarily from, you know, great families or great backgrounds, but God uses very normal people to deliver messages that address these behaviors that are not pleasing to him. And injustice is certainly something that God frowns upon. So we're seeing that in these threads of lessons, and I hope that you'll be challenged by those. This week's lesson, depending on your publisher, is God abhors selfishness. And if you use the UMI curriculum or Power for Living, it is rebuked for selfishness. The Bible basis is Amos chapter 6, verses 4 through 8, and it picks up again at 11 through 14. The Bible truth is God will dispossess the greedy and selfish and thus demonstrate God's justice. The memory verse is verse 12, and our lesson aim is that we will explore God's response to injustice as recorded by Amos, reflect on ways people practice greed and selfishness, and uncover and discover ways God does justice amid injustice and ways humans can join God in the fight against injustice. So selfishness is, yeah, look it up. I know we have this idea, but I always say look up words. So that's one of those words that you should look up for class and have an idea on what Webster says selfishness is. This idea that we become self-absorbed and unable to care for the concerns or things of others. It's really an interesting thing because we so easily identify bad behaviors in other people, and there are lots of times that we have to take a mirror and make sure that we're not falling into those bad behaviors ourselves. In this lesson, we're continuing again in the 3rd week of Amos, so we've already got some background on Amos and the times. But again, how God uses a very normal, average guy who basically is a shepherd. He's an outdoorsman. He's a man who tends sycamore trees, and sends him to this area to speak against what is basically bad behavior. We've got the northern kingdom of Israel, who, for all technical purposes, is living in the lap of luxury. They have everything they could possibly need, have never lived like this before. They are under the reign of Jeroboam II, and they're living better than they ever have. Haven't lived like this since King Solomon, and quite frankly, they would never live like this again in terms of having all the material needs and the resources that they needed. We would basically call them ballers, or I'll probably date myself, rolling in dough. They had everything that they could possibly need, and yet because they were in a time of comfort, they slipped into a place of indifference, a place where they were insensitive to God, and in a place where their hearts were just, again, starting to be hardened because they lost their sensitivity for operating in this place of indifference. And God loved them so much, and he loves us so much, that he would not allow them to continue in this place of bad behavior. So in comes again Amos, this prophet. He's a nobody who comes to a very cosmopolitan area with the beautiful people. And imagine he's a rugged outdoorsman, probably a mountain man kind of looking guy, who comes to this beautiful place and has this message to deliver. And I could imagine that they didn't want to hear what he had to say, because you got this country preacher coming into the beautiful city, and he's got this message, and it's not a message that people want to hear. Again, they're living in high times, and who wants to hear the bad news when you're in the big time? And so he begins, and this is not in the printed text, but go back to verse 1 of chapter 6, and the message starts with the word woe. This is not like whoa. This is woe. This is the bad thing. This is the word. You'd never want a prophet to start out talking about woe. Again, I mentioned last week, prophets, for a while we got into this prosperity ministry, so we like to hear prophets talk about money, houses, and cars. When they come in talking about woe, we're like, whoa. But woe is the word he uses. In other words, it means that this message was about destruction. It was about judgment. And again, not a message that they wanted to hear. I laughed this morning because as I was preparing to make this video, there is a gnat in this house. I don't know why there's a gnat here. We don't have any fresh fruit out. I guess there are some plants around. Whatever it is, there is a gnat. And before this day is over, that gnat is going to meet judgment because he's just annoying. He just keeps buzzing around. I'm doing stuff and he's buzzing around. What are you doing? That basically is how the people of the Northern Kingdom felt about Amos. You're buzzing around here and you're an annoyance, you're a nuisance, and we really don't even want to hear what you have to say. But he comes with this message of woe. And the concerns that are addressed are that because they begin to place their trust in things other than God. Again, there's nothing wrong with having nice things. In fact, 3 John tells us that when John wrote, he said, you know what, I hope that you're prospering and that you're in health, but you do that as your soul prospers. Not that you lose sight of what's important, but do that even as your soul is prospering. And so when Amos writes, he says, woe unto them who are at ease in Zion. And again, there's nothing wrong with rest. We need rest. Rest is a good thing. But when rest becomes indifference or laziness or indulgence, that's a place of sin. It's a place of crossing over because it desensitizes us to the things of God. He talks to them about relying on a false sense of peace and security just because they were in such a comfortable time. In other words, there was a very misplaced trust that they had. And we too have to be careful because the same things happen. When we are in times of comfort and times of plenty, the truth is we do tend to be guilty of misplacing our trust in things. And those things can be our jobs. Those things can be our families. Whatever those things are, we can misplace trust. And slowly we look up and the dependence that we know to have on God, we don't always have so strongly. God even charges them to look at other cities, and God had judged other cities. And when other cities were judged, you know what? Israel thought, oh yeah, they deserve that. They should have been judged. Yeah, God, you got them good. But God says, look at them. You're no better than them, and you too will be judged. We talked about last week's lesson that God is not fooled. Again, the same message is coming to Israel, that God is not going to overlook this bad behavior and let them get away with it. And again, it's so easy for us to look at others and find the sin and the issues in others, but we have to spend as much time making sure that we are not being hypocritical, meaning that we are not struggling with things ourselves. yet calling out things in other people while we justify what's going on in our own lives. Again, basic bad behavior. God does not want us to spend our time calling out what everybody else is doing. We should be focused on what it is we're doing. And in this case, in our lesson, there were several things that were called out. And yes, I'm looking at my notes. If we dig into the lesson, there were specific sins that were called out. They were putting off the day of doom, and they were not grieved over the sin of Joseph. If you start reading, he says that they were laying on beds of ivory. Ivory being a very expensive commodity at the time, but laying on these very expensive beds, and sexual immorality was a problem at the time. So we're dealing with sexual sin. Verse 4 talks about gluttony. Verse 5 talks about using music and entertainment more or less as worship, and they were consumed with it. So that was being consumed with a culture that was entertaining. And then verse 6 is about drunkenness, where they had, I'm sure, beautiful glasses and goblets, but that wasn't enough. They needed to drink wine out of bowls. So enough wasn't enough. So again, we're dealing with sexual sin, gluttony, a culture of entertainment, and drunkenness. And to be honest, again, people living in the land of plenty dealing with these things does not seem unfamiliar to us even today, that we deal with some of those same things. They were also ignoring the day of judgment. Again, this was not a message that they wanted to hear. It's like that gnat. But compromise in the life of the believer, if we don't deal with these little things in our lives, little things ultimately become big things. And that's how we get into that dangerous place of ease or comfort, where, we allow something and nothing happens. So next time we try it and we do it in a bigger way and nothing happens. And before you look up, there is this insensitivity, and you're into a place that you can't figure out how I got here, but it was because we didn't deal with little things in the beginning. Sin is a dangerous thing because sin makes you big promises that it cannot deliver on. So it promises to deliver and satisfy you when actually sin leaves you very empty. Sin seems like a place of freedom. I'm just exploring myself. I'm just being me. Why can't I just be me? Because ultimately, us just being us can be a very imprisoning place. It's not a place of freedom at all. It's a place that sin takes us and it imprisons us. So we have to be careful that we don't allow ourselves to play in those spaces of bad behavior. Addiction and things like that start as very small things. Nobody starts off saying, I want to be an addict. It's the small thing it's a small and simple decision that you look up over time, and it's become a big thing. God goes on to say that I used you to bring justice, and you took pride in that, but now it's your turn to understand that I too, and he begins to talk about the destruction that would come to them, that there would be a nation raised up against them, that they too would be afflicted and taken away. One of the keys that I wrote from this lesson is, again, that there's nothing wrong with being prosperous, but we have an obligation to use the resources and what God has given us in a way that brings glory to Him, and not simply create these pampered and sheltered lives for ourselves. And moreover, we should look for ways to, again, how we can use ways to deal with injustice that's around us, that we deal with things in our own circles, in our own communities, in our own world, that we are finding ways that we too can stand up for injustice. I am inviting you tomorrow night. I didn't look up who the presenter is. That's what this mild distraction is. Inviting you tomorrow night to join Superintendent Michael Payton and the Illinois First Jurisdiction of the Church of God in Christ on the Saturday Night Sunday School line. The dial-in number is 605-475-3235. The access code is 170045, and press pound. Again, okay, I didn't look up who the speaker is. Let me see if I can do this and be very cool about it. I'm not being very cool right now. The speaker tomorrow night is, I don't know who the speaker is. Just be on the line. You won't be disappointed. We're going to go through the lesson verse by verse and get an in-depth study. Also, please check out Dr. Danette Verche, who is also on Facebook. She does the lesson review on Wednesday night. Her replay is already available, so you can pick that up even while you're driving in your cars or just having some downtime at home. It's a great way to get the lesson in full if you need more in addition to this highlight. So thank you so much again for stopping by. Share this, like it, comment. I'd love to hear what you got out of the lesson. And again, let's just be great students together. Go off, have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Bye.